So that supervisor has to be approved by our board. So that's 2,000 hours in direct and 1,000 hours in indirect. Now direct is actual time spent with the client, whether it's an individual, family, or group counseling. So that's the 2,000 hours. The 1,000 hours, well, let me go back. Now, in that 2,000 hours, there's a ratio there. So if you're working and you're doing 40 hours of counseling, if for every 40 hours, you've got to have 1 hour supervision. So after you've completed 40, you've got to stop and make sure that you're getting that 1 hour supervision. Okay? And that's hopefully is going to be on wherever you're working, but it's also going to be on you to identify that. Okay? Once you've completed that, 60 days before you complete it, we're suggesting that you apply for your LPC, just to give yourself some time, just to give the process some time. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on who your supervisor needs to be? I'm thinking folks can find those, yes.
I just have a quick question. I know that the board would prefer that approved supervisor be an LPCS. I mean, that would be what, and that's what we suggest for our students when they're in internships and things of that nature. We know that there's not a plethora of LPCSs out there, so we look at these other disciplines. My question is the board going to be somewhere in the future moving towards having only approved supervisor would be an LPCS?
Yes, we are. Okay. And we would have already been there, but we don't have a large enough pool of LPCSs. So we are accepting an LPC. We'll accept an LCSW. We'll accept a licensed marriage and family therapist, psychologist, or a psychiatrist. So they have to still be, with those degrees and those licenses, they can be approved through us. But yes, we are working toward that LPCS. Because what we're wanting to do is to keep it in the counseling field. So having counselors approve and supervise counselors rather than having people outside of our profession anoint us. Yes, ma'am.
How long would you say the process might be if we found someone out in the field that we were trying to get on the approval list?
They would need to apply. It doesn't necessarily take that long.
Okay.
So if they would fill out the paperwork, submit it, we're finding a couple of weeks, if that long. People have been calling, so it doesn't necessarily take that long. Just have them fill out the paperwork. Okay, and that's something that you can do, in advance.
There's a supervision contract as well, right? That
yes.
For our students to get the LPCA, that is not part of that application process. That the supervision contract would come when they start working towards the hours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes. Right. So after they basically are finished with their schoolwork,
right,
and they're out there.
When they begin the LPC hours, the 3,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm hearing this correctly, to apply for your LPCA, that's something you need to wait until after graduation, or could you apply like 60 days prior to graduation and have the registrar's office just send your degree date and
sure can.
So we can apply for the LPCA and get you the requirements before we graduate.
Yes, don't wait until afterward.
Okay.
Just go ahead and do that. You can also take the NCE. Those are things that you can do. It's like you got nothing else to do your last semester of school, I know. But this is just one more couple of things that you can do in advance that will
Yeah.
help you out.
One of the things that we're doing just to calm our students is that the internship two, we have a practicum and 2 internships.
Oh, excellent.
As part of the K-CREP requirements, but the application process is part of internship too, is filling that out and getting it in and filling the stuff out and making sure you can do some of the stuff ahead of time, like the professional disclosure statement, the actual application. And as Dr. Robinson said, we basically waiting around transcripts and NCE scores. The things that you can't control would be the things that they would be waiting on. And then we talked about this practice gap, where he was talking about the practice gap, that there's sort of that period of time when the board's meeting. The board meets in May, I believe, and in December,
Yes.
so they meet before our graduation dates. So
Yes.
that's what
Right.
always gets complicated. So the one thing, if I could just throw this in there, since you take it back, I think that would help university professors that are sort of pushing our students through this process, is if the board could, I know that I talked with the board at one point, and they said that if our students could get that stuff in, everything that they had control over, in by a certain date, they could be reviewed at that meeting in May and then
Yes.
December, and then they would just be waiting around on the rest of the stuff. If we could get those dates from the board, like maybe if the board could send out to the universities and say, this is sort of the date, if you can have your students have their stuff in by this date, it would be reviewed at the board.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. We can do that.
Okay.
We sure can, or we can put it on our website.
Yeah, that'd be
So
great.
that you would know that this would be our cutoff for our next board meeting.
Sure.
No, but we have that pending classification just for this.
Right.
So we want you to be successful.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I'm originally an out-of-state student, so if I'm actually wanting to go get my doctorate after this, but it's really important for me to get my LPCA first. It's something I really want to work on. So would you recommend that I go through the LPCA process and attain that here first before moving on to the next step? Or do you think that I should apply to the other state's LPCA, wherever my doctoral program might be, to work part-time and get my hours there? Which would you recommend?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's a really complex question, and it's a matter of, so what you're really asking is it easier to transfer a North Carolina license versus starting?
And then move it over.
And I think there's probably a lot of answers for that, but yeah.
I have to check the state.
Yeah.
One of the things
I feel like you're
about
approved
us
by one, it looks
counselors.
good already.
Right, that's true. It does.
And
It's,
that way
it's
goes.
part of it is what 2 states are trying to play nicely together.
Right, and that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Because as a profession, we don't play nice in the sandbox together. We really don't. And each state is feeling like, I'm the stuff. I'm all that. So what they've called portability or reciprocity isn't working nearly as well as it should, particularly among what I would think is K-CREP states, K-CREP
Right.
schools.
Right.
If you've got the same requirements, then why shouldn't you take my license? So
Right.
we're working with that. There's the 2020, and so there are some higher powers that are trying to pull that together, but it's the individual states that are keeping it from not happening. So I'm not sure how to handle that one. Because the other thing is, we're mobile. So while you're in North Carolina today and you go get your doctorate in someplace else, that doesn't mean you're going to die there.
Yeah, you can come back.
Well, you could go someplace
anywhere.
else.
Yeah.
So, it's just what you think you have to do. Yes, ma'am.
I'm unfamiliar with like the jurisprudence exam, but is that the same in every state? So if I did jurisprudence exam, would it be accepted in another state if that's a requirement for their licensure, or would I have
Possibly.
to retake it?
Possibly, it meets our ethics requirement. If you, once you get a degree, once you get licensed, it meets our ethics requirement.
Okay.
It may or may not. I really can't speak for all the other ones, but it may or may not.
Probably not.
Right.
Dr. Robinson's the optimist, you can say. But part of that jurisprudence exam is sort of a examination of your knowledge about that particular state's process for becoming licensed, so it would be different for each state, so, yeah.
And now, the thing about the jurisprudence exam is that it is based on North Carolina. And it's also a pass-fail. And you can take it as many times as you want. So it works that way. And it does have some interesting stuff. So it's not too bad. I saw a hand. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the national exam, because everyone talks about the NCE, but from what I heard earlier this week, the NCMHCE is the only exam that TRICARE, I guess, takes. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
That's
Okay.
true.
So when it's time for me to take the NCE, I guess I would just try and find whoever, I guess, offers that exam. Is that how that works?
Yeah, CCE
Okay.
offers them all, right?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
not,
okay.
it's not an issue to pick one of these exams.
okay.
Yeah, so any of them is fine. And
Okay.
depending on what your area of interest is, you're either going to the rehabilitation counseling, if you're at East Carolina, you've got so there's other things that you can do, but either of those three work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the current time frame now for the 3,000 hours? What is it, do you have to have it within 5 years? Or is there a time frame?
Like how long can we help you see? There's a limit.
I didn't think there was.
Okay.
I don't know that there is a limit.
No, the 3,000 hours that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 3,000 hours, if you're working full-time, is gonna be about 2 years, about 2 years in the field.
Yeah.
So it's not like you get it within 3 years or have to start?
No,
No.
that was just my story.
And can you get these hours in the school setting, or do you have to go out of the school setting to get those?
In the school setting, or
LPC.
Those hours would count if it was being supervised by an approved
Yeah,
supervisor.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so everything's still the same, wherever you are, you gotta have that supervisor. Yes, sir.
I think there used to be a minimum of 8 hours you had to have each week in order to count. Is that still?
No, sir.
Oh, okay, because you couldn't count supervision hours if there were fewer than 8 hours.
Right, so it's 40, and once you get to the 40, you've gotta have the one. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Not about this slide.
Okay. All right. You have another question?
No,
about
not
something
about
else?
this slide.
Yes. This is an issue that we are now having with the board. And we do these kind of presentations, and because of the status in life and the station in life that you're in, you're really concerned with this. And that's great. We want you to be developmentally appropriate where you are, and this is where you are. What we're finding, though, is that we now are doing 2 presentations. The first presentation is how to get your license. The second presentation
I gotta keep it.
is how to lose your license.
How to lose it.
We are having an increased number of people losing their license. And we don't understand why. So we've decided that we're going to spend time talking with all of our presentations about, don't take these number of years, this amount of time, this amount of money, and then blow it in a couple of years. What you usually never hear about in your courses is the responsibility that each of you will have being a counselor. Now, they talk about it in this is the new ACA ethics, they talk about it here, but oftentimes it's not driven home nearly enough in your coursework, the responsibility that you have, also the power that you have once you're in that counseling relationship. unbelievable. People will tell you stuff, and you're thinking, wow, this person just shared with me their innermost feelings. Oh, so we're just raw together. And it's crazy, because oftentimes, from that, because you're getting so close to one another, other emotions start to come out. Like, I really like looking into your eyes.
Oh, yeah. I want to work with sex offenders.
There's some barriers that oftentimes get broken, even though intellectually we say that would never happen. Never, ever happen. But we've got to help you think about, before you get there, just the responsibility, the power, the numbness, those things that can possibly happen to you. If you look at where we are and the kinds of complaints that we're getting, inappropriate dual relationships, breach of confidentiality. Now, what's a breach of confidentiality? What would that mean? As a young counselor, you're going to hear somebody tell you some stuff, and you're going to say, oh man. Understand that everybody has a best friend. And your best friend, you might not be their best friend. Everybody's got a best friend. So someone comes in and they tell you this story, and you just, I'm gonna keep it, I gotta tell it. And you do. And the next person says, I gotta share it, I gotta tell it. So we've gotta be so careful. Unprofessional conduct. You know, we're looking into each other's eyes, and all of a sudden, you know, after 60 seconds or so, things start happening. You know what I'm saying? You've got to be aware of these things, because oftentimes we don't talk about them. So as a board, this is one of the things I didn't understand about the board. We have these ethical hearings. So it's when people have been brought before us and we have to do some things. Can y'all read that? That's the complaint. This is real. It's not something we made up. My girl sitting there. Can I go next?
Not yet.
I'm going to pass out this stuff. All right? Now, this is how the response from the guy says. This is what he says in response to the complaint. Right now, all of you are on the North Carolina Board of Licensed Professional Counselors. What would you do with this person? What would you suggest? You see what the issues are. You've all had your ethics class. Were you in Hawaii, sir, Mr. Martin?